Well, hello and welcome live from us here in Auckland Park, Johannesburg. You are watching The Week Ahead with myself, Liesl Wilson. Interact with us on our various social media platforms throughout the show and throughout the week using the hashtag The Week Ahead or at The Week Ahead. Well, let's get straight into it. Well, we start off today by taking a look at South Africa and Saudi Arabia having signed 17 memoranda of understanding that will facilitate stronger economic relations between the two countries. President Cyril Ramaphosa says the agreements range from renewable energy, mining, agriculture, transport and security. He's in the kingdom with a delegation of business people and ministers on an investment drive. The ministers include Naledi Pandor for International Relations, Ibrahim Patel for Trade, Industry and Competition, Gwede Mantashe for Mineral Resources and Energy, as well as Fikile Mbalula for Transport.
This has been a phenomenally successful visit for us. We've brought with us more than 100 business people. And the good thing is that this visit has been more focused on the economy, as well as advancing our diplomatic, as well as political relations with Saudi Arabia. But the economic side and the business side have really underpinned the real substance of this visit. We had extensive discussions with His Royal Highness the Crown Prince last night, and we had a very good summit which involved all our ministers, and we covered a great deal of ground. The fact that we signed up to 17 MOUs testifies to the real great success that we have achieved here, because having started in 2018 with a commitment by Saudi Arabia to invest $10 billion into the South African economy, that in many ways was planting the seed. And that seed has been germinating, and thus far $1 billion has been invested in South Africa through a company called Aqua Power and Renewable Energy. And we are now going to be seeing more of those billions that the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is very keen to invest in South Africa, beginning to flow, underpinned by these 17 MOUs that we have signed. And of course, between 2018 and now, COVID intervened and stalled and delayed everything. We're now going to see everything gathering pace and momentum. They are very serious business people. Both the private sector owned businesses as well as public sector owned businesses are very serious. They are action oriented, they are outcomes oriented, they want to see implementation. And the Crown Prince and myself have committed that we are going to be monitoring the implementation of all this. And as Minister Patel said, the area span right across, from maritime to food security to agriculture to ICT to logistics, to also setting up a joint investment fund, just demonstrates the seriousness with which Saudi Arabia is approaching the relationship between South Africa and this kingdom. They see us as a gateway, South Africa as a gateway into the African continent, but Sub-Saharan Africa. And we also see Saudi Arabia as a gateway into this market in the Middle East. And already a number of South African companies are operating here. We already have a number of very skilled South Africans who are operating here. And already a number of our goods and products are beginning to proliferate here in this market. And in a little while, we are going to go to the Lulu market to go and see the extent to which South African markets made in South Africa by South African workers are already present here. So the future looks really great and bright for South Africa in its partnership with Saudi Arabia in all areas, defense, military, and you name it. We're going to see great progress. They are highly ambitious. They are building a new city, and a city which will also involve a lot of South African intellectual property involvement and construction involvement. And those great ambitions rub on us because they have a lot of capital. They have a lot of ambition to invest and grow their capital base. And so we become a very attractive market and place for them to be partners. And the solid relationship that exists between our two countries is a good springboard on which to be able to base the great success that we hope to achieve. So we're very happy. I think we go home not empty-handed. Already during the business forum, business people were able, and Saudi business people were able to craft agreements that will amount to about $15 billion both ways in terms of the dealings that they have crafted. And so I'm looking at easily quite a lot of billions of dollars being invested also in our economy. And they will also be participating in our investment conference next year. So I think we are on a good roll in terms of our relationship with Saudi Arabia, which is based on really solid economic parameters. And that, for me, behoves well for a future that will be a good one for all our peoples.
Right, on the back of that, former President Jacob Zuma has once again approached the Constitutional Court to appeal an earlier ruling by Judge Piet Koen in the Pietermaritzburg High Court, dismissing his application for the recusal of lead prosecutor in his corruption case, Advocate Billy Downer. Now, this comes after the Constitutional Court 2 weeks ago dismissed an application for the President on the Supreme Court of Appeal to reconsider his application for leave to appeal. For leave to appeal Koen's ruling, rather. Now, this comes as the arms deal corruption case against Zuma and French arms company Thales is set to come before the Pietermaritzburg High Court again on Monday. Perhaps for this and more, let's bring in Thabo Masumbuga, who is a senior legal consultant, to unpack further. Thabo, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us here on the SABC. Let's just quickly unpack the next set of legal processes that's set to unfold come Monday. And, you know, whether there's potential conflict of interest, how would you weigh in as we look at the stacks, the odds rather, whether they stacked for or against him?
Look, what is important is that appeal processes are, of course, available for every litigant in the country and in society. They are available to every litigant to the extent that they provide an escalation of a process where you feel that a lower or another forum has not been able to give you what is called a fair hearing or a fair outcome. But dealing with the merits of this one in particular, I have a view that the Constitutional Court will still come to the same conclusion as all other courts in this matter, because what Jacob Zuma is trying to do is, in fact, stalling and delaying a process to finally have a court of law ventilate the charges or allegations against him.
All right. So you're saying, well, some of the view rather, that there are some delay tactics at hand. many asking why spend time, on a journalist and even an advocate through criminal prosecution. And then, so as we look at the tactics that are at play, I want to bring in another element that's come into play. Judge Piet Koen, having postponed the arms deal to the 17th of October. This comes a few days after the JSC is set to complete, fulfilling the vacancies for the role for various roles at the SA courts. And I wonder how that could potentially impact whether, Judge Piet Koen could continue with the trial. How would you weigh in on some of the dynamics unfolding on that front too?
A date is a date. A date is a date because it has nothing to do with the unfolding processes. Those are completely unrelated in my view. The fact of the matter here is that Jacob Zuma's legal strategy, and I use the word in inverted commas, the legal strategy is to delay this matter to the best of his ability. It's always a legal tactic that is applied at all given set of circumstances. But here's the issue. The issue at hand is whether or not Billy Downer is a first competent, second able, third legally entitled to prosecute on behalf of the state. There is no law in any country. There is no rule that prevents the National Prosecuting Authority to decide just merely on the basis of allegations on who should prefer or should lead the state case against a particular accused person. At hand here is charges against Jacob Zuma. He needs to be able to say, I have a defense, legally sound, legally prudent, and legally substantial. That's all you need to go. But remember, he does not have to prove his innocence beyond any reasonable doubt. All he has to do in relation, at least to the extent of all the charges, to do what is called give or provide the court with a legally acceptable, probable version. That's all that he needs to do. The state must and has to, in all circumstances, prove its case beyond any reasonable doubt.
All right, so with that said, another span in the works with, Arthur Fraser's decision being found to be unlawful by the Pretoria High Court, and now the former president having taken this on appeal to the Supreme Court of Appeal. That ruling is still pending. How is this also set to impact the legal woes that the former president is facing? What other scenarios could come about as a result of that?
The Constitutional Court is the last court of arbitration. It's the last court of escalation. It's the last court of decision making. So if his court goes there, if his matter goes there and it gets dismissed there, then that's it. That's the end of the road for him. He has got to abide by the decision of what is called the criminal case before Judge Koen in Pietermaritzburg has got to proceed. However, here's another spanner in the works that we have not asked me. What does this mean? Should, in all scenarios possible, in all circumstances available, what does it mean if the Constitutional Court agrees with it? Then it throws the spanner on the works of the National Prosecuting Authority. But remember, this is not a Billy Downer matter. It's a state versus Zuma. The charge sheet, the evidence, and whatever that they have must be able to. Let's use a US example. What if Billy Downer dies today? All right? God forbid. What if Billy Downer is thrown under the bus tomorrow or resigns? All that is important is that the state must at all times be able to, at all relevant and material times, be able to proceed with the charges against him with or without Billy Downer.
So then you speak about, some of those implications. And as if we look at this, in context of South Africa, socially and politically, how is these tensions, perhaps the trial, enforced or reinforced, perhaps also brought to the fore, the issues that is currently, I think, unfolding in the ruling party? I'm asking this just as we head to the National Elective Conference of the ANC. How do you think this is also expected to impact those dynamics?
It's only playing into the public opinion narrative. You remember, public opinion narrative dominates when there's ignorance of the law and fact. Now, in South Africa generally, there's ignorance of the law and fact. And when there's ignorance of the law and fact, the public opinion narrative takes predominance. People are able to use events in court, about cases, just merely to give an impression that Jacob Zuma is persecuted. Remember, this case does not have political innocence. Now, what do I mean by political innocence? We know, me and you know, that there's a McCarthy incident many years ago, former President Taung, how this was used as a political narrative towards Polokwane and how former President Jacob Zuma came into office. So, public opinion narrative in this country does find predominance in instances where there's what is called ignorance of the law and fact.
All right. Thank you very much for ironing out those facts. Perhaps also weighing in this ahead of what's expected to take place today. We'll have to leave the conversation for now, Thabo. But Thabo was just weighing in on the case involving former President Jacob Zuma, once again having approached the Constitutional Court to appeal an earlier ruling by Judge Piet Koen in the Pietermaritzburg High Court, dismissing his application for the recusal of lead prosecutor in his corruption case, Advocate Billy Downer. This obviously comes after the Constitutional Court 2 weeks ago dismissed an application for the President of the Supreme Court of Appeal to reconsider his application for leave to appeal to Koen's ruling. This then also comes as the arms deal corruption case against the former president and the French arms company Thales is set to come before the Pietermaritzburg High Court. Thabo Mazumbuga, senior legal consultant, really just weighing in on what some of the dynamics and scenarios we can expect ahead of Monday. Thank you again to him for his time. In other news now, Human Settlements Minister Mamoluko Kubai, says that they will continue to develop informal settlements and improve the quality of life. We'll have that and other stories on the other side. Let's take a quick ad break. We'll be right back. Right, the week ahead with myself, Liesl Wilson, continues. Human Settlements Minister Mamoluko Kubai says that they will continue to develop informal settlements as well as improve quality of life. Now, Kubai did speak to the SABC News on the sidelines of the UN Habitat Conference in Pretoria, meant to accelerate transformation of informal dwellings as well as slums. The UN Habitat Executive Director Maimuna Mod Sharif has also called on member states to fulfill all their commitments. Our SABC News reporter Kylie Komalo and video journalist Leopo Silelele filed this report.
This gathering is very important. We decided because you remember that 2016 South Africa started as well through UN Habitat 3, hosted a process that kickstarted the interventions in informal settlements upgrading. This is carrying on, being the champion, but utilizing ourselves as an example of what we are doing in upgrading of informal settlements, but to make sure that our cities are integrated, are resilient and are sustainable. Because the issue of informal settlements and slum dwelling continues to threaten the conditions of how people can live, and betterly they can be able to be integrated. But more importantly, to bring people closer to economic opportunities. And we note that in terms of the stats, we are told that by 2030 and 2050, quite a number of people will be living in cities. That's why it's important to deal with the issues of informal settlements and slum dwelling. So being given the opportunity as South Africa, to host this UN international event. It also contributes to our economic recovery. You'd note that one of the pillars there, it's around tourism, and hosting events and international gatherings contributes to that. So that's why it's such an important gathering for us.
And obviously, Minister, the challenge of the rapid urbanization, where quite a number of South Africans are moving to the cities, it's a big challenge, I would imagine, especially around Gauteng, where you do have all these cities, but, you know, the mushrooming of the informal settlements. How is your department, planning around that particular challenge?
Yeah, in the country, as I said in my speech, we've got about 1.4 million households living in informal settlements in the country. These are about 2,600 informal settlements across. Now, urban areas, yes, like Johannesburg and Tshwane, and your Cape Town, eThekwini, Metro specifically, have quite a lot of challenge in terms of that. The migration of people from rural areas into urban areas, migration of people, especially in the region, SADC region, into our cities also pose a challenge. But what we are doing in terms of analyzing, we found that not everybody in an informal settlement literally needs a PNG or an RDP. We are finding that they do not need a free housing. They need affordable space to live that they can either rent or buy. And that's why our social housing program responds to that. And that's one of the areas we would want to see expanding in the coming years so that it can afford the majority of South Africans to have a shelter over their head and a decent one that they can, even those who can be able to pay, afford it.
And just before I let you go, Minister, another challenge you highlighted is around the illegal occupation of land. How are you dealing with that issue?
Look, firstly, we are saying to cities, when people illegally occupy land, evict immediately so that we don't have a problem, because it creates a problem for us for planning. And many of the South Africans are saying to us, you are incentivizing illegal actions. Those of us who are disciplined stay either in our backyards, don't illegally occupy. You forget about us and you prioritize the people who are actually in terms of this illegally occupying lands.
In other news, as the world marks World Food Day, the Free State Province is on a drive to improve food security. The province says the effects of COVID-19 on food security remain dire. This as more people have lost jobs. Our backyard gardens are seen as a cost-effective solution to food security, where Free State Premier Sisi Ntombela and Agricultural MEC Dembeni Ngangisa visited Boshof to encourage residents to start their own food gardens.
Hunger, a scourge that is affecting more people, especially following the COVID-19 pandemic. The high unemployment rate has been linked to the increasing levels of hunger in the country. In the Free State Province, 28% of its population of about 3 million people reportedly go hungry on a daily basis. The situation is even worse in KwaZulu-Natal and the Eastern Cape, which sit at 58% and 56% respectively. For this unemployed father of 4, social grants provide the only guarantee of food on the table.
Family are struggling to get piece jobs. Sometimes we are struggling and we are struggling because of we're surviving by the grant of the child.
The province says it is encouraging people to take up agriculture as a way to increase food security. It says there are opportunities for long-term employment in the sector. Food gardens are seen as an immediate solution to reduce the hunger problem.
You know, as Free State, we are really encouraging our people to take the direction of agriculture. We want the Free Staters to be very involved in agriculture. And we believe that this is going to assist us, to decrease unemployment.
The province says it wants to regain its position as the country's food basket. The Agriculture Department says it is boosting efforts to end hunger through agriculture.
We also have a target as the Free State. Remember, Free State was the food basket of the country. So we go in there. With the strides that we've made now to support them, with the program the Premier's outline of food gardens, we are going towards that because food is becoming expensive due to costs that are not necessarily controlled by South Africa. The fuel price.
Ngangisa says his department is making headway in ensuring that it improves food security in the province. Kamogelo Siekwi, SABC News, Boshof.
While Mpumalanga's small-scale farmers in rural areas are struggling to sell their produce, about 20 cooperatives, mainly run by women, say that access to markets is important for their growth. The Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development handed over a pack house to the cooperatives at Mzinti in Nkomazi. The facility will be used to package and process vegetables for the market as well as make them ready for export. This comes as the world marks International Day of Rural Women.
Rural women cultivating food for the nation. But it's also about a love and passion for farming, coupled with hard work. And it's bearing fruit for women like Zanele Lubisi.
16 years in Lima.
I've been planting vegetables here for 16 years. I'm able to put food on the table and educate my children. But we don't have a market to grow because people want to buy our produce cheap and later sell them expensive, and we can't make profit.
Now they boast a pack house equipped with cool storage facilities, among others. The farmers are overjoyed.
The pack house will help me because I'm going to be easy to process, and it will be easy to get a market when your things are fresh. People need things that are fresh from the farm, and when they're looking at things, if they are good, it's selling itself.
We are having more or less 21 registered cooperative in Nkomazi, which are producing vegetables. And the families, I should say, it's more or less 500 people will benefit from this project.
International Day of Rural Women celebrate women's efforts in agricultural development, building climate resilience, and addressing the growing malnutrition and food insecurity.
But we will strive hard to ensure that our schools, our church organizations, our prisons, our hospitals do get what is required as a nutrition, because this is our source of income as rural women.
While they hope to develop markets locally, their dream is to export to neighboring Eswatini and Mozambique. Dumela Machogo, SABC News, Mzinti, Nkomazi.
Well, Nigerian government have started to distribute food and non-food items to disaster-stricken states. Nigeria's worst floods in a decade have so far killed more than 500 people, forcing 1.4 million people out of their homes and destroyed over 70,000 hectares of farmland.
More than 500 people dead, 90,000 homes underwater, and food and fuel supplies blocked. Widespread floods are causing chaos in Nigeria. The head of the country's National Emergency Management Agency describes the scale of the disaster as colossal. In Lokoja, a city at the confluence of the Niger and Benue rivers, homes and businesses are submerged. Residents like Khalid Yahya Othman wade through knee-high waters.
Over 60 to 70 years now, I've never seen such a thing. So maybe it may have something to do with climate change.
State oil company NNPC has blamed the floods, which have blocked a key road, for a fuel shortage in the capital Abuja. The floods have been building since early summer. 27 of the country's 36 states have been hit, the government says, and 1.4 million people affected. Nigerian authorities say the flooding has been caused by heavier than usual rains, and that it intensified after water releases from the Lagdo Dam in neighbouring Cameroon.
Well, Chad is facing severe climate change disasters where severe droughts followed by the worst floods in 30 years have led to 2.1 million people in Chad acutely hungry. According to the United Nations Children Fund, 10% of children under the age of 5 are affected by severe malnutrition, and 1 in 3 will suffer from stunted growth.
Amid a climate crisis in Chad, this is becoming an increasingly common sight. children in hospital being treated for severe malnutrition. Their mothers, like Kelu Bishara Hussein, anxiously at their side.
My child has been hospitalized here for a week. At the beginning, he was vomiting and having a lot of diarrhea. He had a fever all the time, couldn't eat and couldn't sleep. As a result, he was losing a lot of weight and was getting weaker and weaker. Now that he's in hospital, he is much better.
Severe drought in Chad, followed by the worst floods in 30 years, have led to rocketing food prices. According to UN agencies, a record 2.1 million people are acutely hungry. Alex Togyangwe, head of administration at the Notre Dame des Apôtres Hospital in Chad's capital N'Djamena, says more and more children are being hospitalized. They've already had 1,700 admitted this year, he said, compared with 1,700 for the whole of 2021 and 1,261 in 2020. The UN's Children's Agency says 10% of all children under 5 in Chad are affected by acute malnutrition. 1 in 3 will suffer from stunted growth. And it's not only physical development that is affected, says Dr. Apollinaire Dotenan.
When a child is in a state of malnutrition, there is a decrease in his or her cognitive abilities.
That impacts, he said, what they can achieve academically and in terms of economic productivity. What that means, if the situation does not improve, is a whole generation in Chad seeing their future compromised because of a lack of food.
Welcome back. The week ahead with myself, Hazel Wilson, continues. Now, business says it's losing millions of rand as the Transnet strike continues. The Durban Chamber of Commerce and Industry estimates that the strike is costing the economy R1 billion a day.
Many businesses around the country are affected by the strike, which started last week. Mano Jane runs an event company in Durban. She says she is waiting for goods to be delivered for a function she's organizing a week from now. The container with her goods, however, is still stuck in the port. She may be forced to hire the items she needs at a great cost.
I'm very affected. Reason being, I like to be very exclusive with my functions. So I've bought things abroad. My container has arrived. It's arrived on the 12th. And now with the strike, there's a lot of delays now. So I'm very, very, very stressed because I have to do plan B now. I have maybe to go and hire. As it is now, I'm very confused.
A global clearing and forwarding company says it has already lost customers and is losing millions of rands.
At this stage, we've got about 31 ships which are sitting on stacks, are not yet able to come into the port to discharge the containers. And clients are fighting with us, asking for their containers. Yet, we've still got another export containers and our breakback export cargoes who are now sitting at sheds.
Kanyile says one of the ships they are handling has been rerouted to Singapore. Earlier, Transnet said operations in Durban, the country's busiest port, have been severely disrupted. Long queues of trucks are waiting to enter the bulk handling terminal in Durban Harbour. Some truck drivers have been waiting for more than a day.
The strike is affecting us. I came here at 2:30 at the staging area. There was a long queue there and there are delays. If there was no delays, I would have gone back to take another load.
Meanwhile, negotiations between Transnet and the unions remain deadlocked. Londi Khatebe, SABC News, Durban.
Miners are moving away from their over-reliance on the electricity grid. Gold producer Goldfield says it's intensifying their focus to renewable energy. Now, this is part of the mine's contribution towards the global goal to eradicate emissions by 2050. This goal is to see countries globally lowering their carbon usage, contributing to cleaner energy.
Rolling blackouts have cost the mining industry billions of rands. This is seen in the latest statistics from SABC. The constant rationing of power cuts are seen to begin eating into production gains. This is why mines such as Goldfields have taken it upon themselves to produce their own power using solar. This project will see the mine saving more than 20% in their annual power bill. Goldfields says the first phase of the construction of its 60-megawatt solar plant began in October last year. It plans to decarbonize its electricity supply by focusing on looking into the feasibility of wind turbines, exploring battery storage solutions, wheeling electricity while expanding the solar park.
We've built this plant to generate 50 megawatts. We licensed for 60 megawatts at the moment, but obviously can't consume the full 60 right yet. But as we pick up production, we will. It's also worthwhile to look at it in terms of gigawatt hours. So we've designed the plant to deliver just over 100 gigawatt hours per annum, which will make up 25% of our annual gigawatt consumption of just over 400 gigawatt hours per annum.
The mine says it wants to see more mines taking up this initiative. This will help lessen the pressure on Eskom's grid. On the other hand, the mine says the current global conditions are impacting on their operations, and therefore it will be looking at sourcing parts locally to avoid the sharp importing costs.
Inflation, we're obviously feeling it with where the exchange rate is going. We're also then seeing certain key commodities that we're sourcing out of Europe. Ammonium nitrate, which is one of the things that drives explosive prices. There's certain steel products which impacts on some of the equipment we buy because that's sourced from Eastern Bloc countries. And then there's the general inflation that's happening. So we are under pressure. We are keeping our inflation within targets.
Goldfields is also prioritizing its ESG targets, which include tailings management, gender diversity, and water conservation.
Currently, South Deep is recycling 80% of its water, just north of 80% of its water. We are exploring opportunities to improve on that. And one of the big drives on the mine, and we've started installing reverse osmosis plants, is that we want to become totally independent, that we're not consuming potable water.
On Friday, the power utility signed a deal of more than 20 years with 4 independent power producers. This will see the power utility adding an estimated additional 2,000 megawatts to the grid, lessening the pressure on the grid with the hope of slowing the frequency of crippling rolling blackouts. Notando Makutulela, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Well, Parliament's portfolio committees of Mineral Resources and Energy, Police and Home Affairs are calling for the complete demolition of all abandoned mines to curb illegal mining. The committees are conducting a 2-day joint oversight visit to assess the state of illegal mining in the Northwest Province, where the visit comes a few days after a group of 21 alleged illegal miners were arrested by a police team led by the Hawks. Over 20 firearms, ammunition and explosives were confiscated during the arrests in Stilfontein.
One of countless sites of illegal mining in the country, abandoned and left to fester, turning into a haven for criminal elements that have spilled over to local communities.
There are kidnappings, there are rapes, there are hijackings, there are murders, and some of the crimes that were not there before these people arrive. But now we are seeing an increase in the hijackings and in the murder and in the rapes, and mostly murders are being committed with a firearm.
But it seems the situation was left to deteriorate over time.
We can't get the explanation why this area is still active to be utilized by Zamas. We are told that there was an application for liquidation as early as the 1980s up to 1995, and it seems they still want to believe that that liquidation is still in effect. Surely you can't have a liquidation that sits for more than 30 years.
At the next site of illegal mining activities, the members of the parliamentary portfolio committees were even more disappointed.
You can see from the state of the buildings here that this thing has long not been operational. So why have you waited for so long?
This is a serious war zone, this area. And I wanted us, because we are not going to be able to visit all the shafts. But I can tell you that this belt is where the highest form of violence takes place.
Authorities say collaborative efforts are in place to combat this level of criminality.
We are deeply concerned as the department, and especially in the wake of what has happened in Krugersdorp. That has put a sharp spotlight on the illegal and illicit mining that the Zama-Zamas are doing. And that is why we work collaboratively with the law enforcement agencies. That is why we work with your Home Affairs and other relevant stakeholders.
We have already conducted 59 operations as at the beginning of this year. Total number of 232 people have since been arrested. The breakdown is 149 are from Lesotho, 48 Mozambicans, 17 Zimbabweans, and then 18 South Africans.
The portfolio committee says it will also rope in the Department of Justice in its endeavors to address the scourge of illegal mining. Sintle Inglihihi, SABC News, Stilfontein.
Well, in other news now, through the recycling of unwanted electronics, a Nigerian company is creating a rechargeable light source that many Nigerians are in need of. The portable light has been welcomed by small business whose operations have been impacted by power interruptions.
For employees at Nigeria's Quadloop, these old laptops are much more than just electronic waste. They are a source of light. The company recycles the lithium batteries inside, as well as other parts such as wires, screws and screens, into solar lanterns. Quadloop founder Dozie Aguelo says there is a market for locally produced affordable electronics in Nigeria, but that many of the components are not available.
We notice that yes, there's a market for this, and if we leverage electronic waste, we're going to cut down the cost of production as well as cost of sales. That's why we started building, and that's what brought us to where we are today.
Aguelo says many of the customers for the solar units, which sell for $32 each, are small businesses. In a country that suffers severe power outages, it's a way for them to stay productive. One such client is Blessing Samuel. The hairdresser says she previously had to run her generator at night or postpone unfinished work to the following day.
Relieve me of the stress of buying fuel and extra expenses.
Aguelo says there is a pressing need for cheaper devices in Africa's most populous country. As well as small businesses, his target market includes local community hospitals. Amid Nigeria's energy crisis, it's a way for them to keep the lights on, with the added bonus of helping tackle climate change.
Well, the Democratic Republic of Congo's government says it plans to settle oil bills to avoid nationwide fuel shortages that hit the country back in September. The DRC has already paid around $430 million in fuel subsidies, but still owed back payments of around $160 million.
Democratic Republic of Congo is in talks with oil companies to settle its bills of around $160 million, the government has said, as it seeks to avoid nationwide fuel shortages. Long queues formed at gas stations in major cities earlier this year as stocks dwindled. Business and government sources blamed that situation on delayed payments to suppliers as global fuel prices rose due to the war in Ukraine. On Monday, Congo's finance ministry released a note saying it had paid around $430 million in fuel subsidies, but still owed back payments of around $160 million. Like several African countries, Congo subsidizes fuel to avoid inflation and keep prices stable. The International Monetary Fund says that while fuel subsidies are intended to protect consumers, they leave countries exposed to high fiscal costs.
Let's leave it there. We'll have more news and updates on the other side upon our return. We'll be right back. Welcome back. As we continue now, news further afield, the U.S. President Joe Biden has authorized the release of another $72 million worth of military aid for the Ukraine. The Presidential Drawdown Authority allows the United States to transfer defense articles and services swiftly without congressional approval. Now, the Defense Department says it will include additional ammunition for rocket systems, artillery rounds, anti-tank weapons, and medical supplies. Meanwhile, millions of Ukrainians have been forced to adjust to living in fear.
The inside of this Kharkiv bomb shelter is the only home 6-month-old Zhenya has ever known. Settled in his pram, he enjoys a rare treat, his mother walking him outdoors along a nearby factory forecourt. 39-year-old Olha Shevchenko was 7 months pregnant with Zhenya when war broke out in Ukraine on February 24th. Her house in the Ukrainian village of Prudyanka was destroyed by shelling that same morning.
We were woken up at 5 in the morning by the sound of the bombs. We live about 12 to 15 miles from the border. We could hear everything well. At 6 a.m, the suburban train stopped running, so we could not leave, but our neighbours gave us a lift in their car.
When Shevchenko and her 2 teenage sons reached Ukraine's second city, she rejoined her husband. They were offered a refuge in the shelter underneath the factory where he works and moved in. Zhenya was born in a nearby maternity hospital just 2 months after they arrived. Her 2 elder sons left for Poland last month, where friends helped arrange accommodation and schooling for them. For Shevchenko, her new brick and concrete surroundings have a disconcerting familiarity.
I knew this bomb shelter because when I was a little girl, I saw it with my grandpa. I asked him what it was for, and he said, for when the war comes, but hopefully you will never have to see it again. Well, now I have.
Renewed shelling in Kharkiv has made it increasingly dangerous for the family to be outside, so they've worked hard to make the shelter as livable as possible. It's linked to the power grid and equipped with basic cooking facilities, food, books, toys, and even a TV, all part of preparations for what they expect to be a longer haul underground.
We will surely spend winter here, because we have nowhere else to go, nowhere to stay. We are not going to go back home, because first of all, in order to rebuild it and clean it all, it is not a job that can be done in a day.
Well, closer to home now, Taung artists and SMEs in the Northwest Province have welcomed the postponement of the Taung Cultural Calabash, scheduled to take place this weekend. They've accused the Mabana Arts, Culture and Sports Foundation of corruption, alleging that the service provider bidding adjudication process was in fact flawed. Local artists, businesses and other residents stormed the Taung Centre earlier, threatening to stop the calabash if they were excluded from partaking in the festival.
The Taung Cultural Calabash, founded over 20 years ago to stir the pride of the Taung-based Botswana in their indigenous cultures and arts through a variety of performances. Over 4 million rand was reportedly budgeted for the event in this financial year. The festival has now been postponed indefinitely. Residents allege that this 3-day event has been marred by corruption.
The supply chain processes that are under the Public Finance Management Act 1 of 1999 were defied. Why? Because of there was no pronunciation of the bidder. Those who lost were never sent the letters of regrets. There was no adjudication report. There was no a proper and professional pronunciation in the media. So it is part of the things that shows us that there's something fishy that is happening here, that the authorities don't want the communities to get exposed to.
Local artists who welcomed the postponement bemoaned their exclusion.
We are happy about the postponement of the Taung cultural calabash. What we want, we as artists, we want to be recognized, and we don't have issues with whoever who's appointing who from outside. We don't have problem with that. What we want as an artist, we want our calabash back.
We are happy that the calabash is postponed as artists, number one, because we feel like at first the level of the conduct, it was not right. We were not engaged, we were not involved.
The business sector, which says it has been neglected for too long, wants to organize the event themselves.
We decided as business people of Taung to group ourselves to say we now want Calabash to be arranged and organized by the people of Taung, so that it must be beneficial to the business sector of Taung, because every time, from time immemorial, Calabash has been organized. The event came and went away without any development whatsoever of the business people.
SABC News contacted the Mabana Arts, Culture and Sports Foundation numerous times to respond to the allegations of corruption, among others, but to no avail. Deborah Pakedi, SABC News, Taung.
Well, on that note, that's where we're going to leave it for you today. Thank you very much for tuning in. Of course, we are back next week. Until then, do take care. It's goodbye for now from myself and the rest of the team.